Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be teaching us how to make a princess dart bustier. So there's actually a simple princess dart. I'm still going to teach us how to do that, but I just want to quickly teach us how to make a princess dart bustier. So what do you need? The first thing you need is to lay your cloth as usual. Once you get your fabric, then you lay it. So this is my fabric, and then I lay. So what do I lay? I lay with my bust, since this is actually intended for a peplum blouse, but I just want to teach us the bustier part alone, the princess dart bustier. So that means it's going to be from the waist, from the bust to the waist, and then from the bust to the waist. That means you are going to need your vertical measurements and horizontal measurements. The vertical measurement I'll be using today for the waist is 16. That's the shoulder to the waist is 16. The shoulder to the waist is 16. So I'm going to add half inch for the sewing allowance. That will give me 17. And then I'm still going to add extra 1 inch because of the bustier part. It has a way of shortening the length of the clothes, so I will add it. Then if there's need to trim it off later, I will trim it off, because eventually I might not need the whole 1 inch, but at least you need about 3/4 to 1 inch depending on how bustier the clothes is. So I'm going to measure 18, 16 for my shoulder to waist, 1 inch to join the bodice to the peplum, and half inch to join the bodice to the peplum, and another half inch to join the shoulder. So the final 1 inch I'm adding here is actually for the princess dart, because it has a way of shortening the length. I hope that's clear now. So that's 18. And then my shoulder to under bust, you're going to need your under bust measurements now. My shoulder to under bust is 14, but I'm going to add half because that point, because of the joining on the shoulder, so that makes it 14.5. Then my shoulder to nipple is 10, but I'm going to add half too because of the joining on the shoulder. So after doing all that, I'm going to connect all my vertical points together using a ruler. So once I'm through with that, another vertical measurement to take is actually my armhole. So the bust I'm considering today is 38. So 38 divided by 6 plus 1 will give me 7.3, but I'm going to use 7.5. So that's 7.5. Before that, let's just take the shoulder. The shoulder for this measurement is, for this cloth, is 15.5. So I'm going to take 15.5. I'm going to take 15.5 and divide by 2. This is 15.5. That's 7.75 plus half after dividing it by 2. So that's giving me 8.25. So from there, I'm going to come down by let's say half now for my shoulder slope. And for my neck, I'm going to use, I hope we can see, for my neck I'm just going to use 4 inches and then come down by 6 inches. So I'm making a round neck. I'll use my hands to connect it together. So you could also use a French curve to connect it together. Then from there, I'm going to join the tip of this neck width, the tip here. I'm going to join it to where my shoulder ends here on the slope using a ruler. So that's that. Now I can take my armhole, as earlier said, My armhole is 7.5, so I can take the points. I hope that's clear. And then rule it out too. So these are the basic points that we need in laying our clothes. Now, how did I achieve this folding? I told us initially that you're going to consider your bust divided by 4. The bust divided by 4 is 9.5, because it's 38 divided by 4 is 9.5. So 9.5, I'll add 2 inches for my seam allowance at the sides. That gives me 1 to 11.5. Then 2 inches for my princess dart, because we're going to cut some parts out. 1, 2. So I'm laying 13.5. I hope that's clear. I'm laying 13.5. So that was how I achieved this laying. So the first thing is to actually achieve the laying. Then you draw out your vertical points this way. Then you measure your shoulder, take your shoulder slope, connect your neck, and then you can also rule out these parts, because we need it. This armhole part, we need that square part. So I'm going to consider what I used for the shoulder, which is 8.25. I'll measure it again in order to achieve a straight line, and then I'll connect it together here. So this is it. Can you see that? In order to get our armhole. So the first thing here now on this armhole side is to measure where our bust ends exactly. So the bust ends at 9.5. That's 38 divided by 4, which is 9.5. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to draw it like my normal armhole. The normal armhole is that you're going to measure it this way. This 7.5. Come here and measure whatever is on this smaller part too. So that gives me 8.75. So 8.75 divided by 2. This is 8.75. So you just divide it by 2. Wherever that 2 ends here, you divide it by 2. And you come in by 3/4. You come in by 3/4. You connect the 3/4 to where the shoulder ends, and then you connect this also to meet this point here. You could actually use your armhole curve or your French curve to connect these points. So after connecting these points, now we're going to come to where her nipple is. This is the nipple line, the chest line. So when I say nipple line or chest line, is the same thing. 8 divided by 2 gives me 4 plus half. That gives me 4.5. I hope that's clear. Then I'll come to my under bust here, and depending on how busty the person is, I can either take 1 inch on this side or about 3/4. But you don't want to take too much in on this side, but you can actually take much in on the other side. So since this is 4.5, I'm just going to take 1 inch on this side. 1 inch on this side, and I'm also going to measure that 4.5 in order to get the center point. I'll measure the 4.5 on the waistline too. You can connect it together so that you know the points. So this is the 4.5 points. So you measure 1 inch to this side on the under bust line. You also measure 1 inch to this side on the waistline. Then on this side, you can take in as much as 1.5 to 2 inches, but I'm just going to use 1.5. But if you are very busty, you can use as much as 2 inches. So normally in our darts, we used to come down by like 1 inch to ½ inch, depending on how busty the person is. But here I'm just going to come down by ½ inch because the person is not so busty. Now I'll connect. So I actually consider that half points here in order to connect. Can you see to this point here? So you connect this way. to this point here, and then this is going to be straight down. You do the same for this side too. From that half point, you connect it together, and then you come down to join this. Can we see that? Okay, so for this you also come up by half. So from this half point, just draw a straight line to meet this armhole cuff that we have actually done here. But because it's bustier, because you want it very firm on your bust, you come down by, you can measure like 1 inch, half inch on both sides. But I'm just going to measure 3/4 on both sides. 3/4 of an inch on both sides. So that sums it up to 1.5. Is that clear? So I will connect it to that 3/4 line. I hope you can see. You bring it here, you connect to the 3/4 line, and you also bring it here, connect to the 3/4 line. But you see, this 3/4 line here, you know, we actually took 3/4 in here and 3/4 in here, making 1.5. So you are going to measure that 1.5 from this point here. You're going to measure it outside, and you will know the benefit of that by the time you are connecting together. So from this point here now, you can draw down again. So this is the actual armhole now for our princess dart bustier, not the initial one we drew here. So I hope we are getting it. And then, so it's as simple as this. Is our princess dart bustier. The next thing now is to take our measurements. Our bust is 38 divided by 4, which gives us 9.5, plus 2 inches sewing allowance, that's 11.5, plus this one here, is actually going to remove about 1 inch. So you add that 1 inch, and then to join it back 1 inch. So 1 inch, that because we're going to cut out this portion now. This 1 inch you want to cut out, and then the remaining 1 inch, that's half to join it back together. You will see the importance better by the time we do it this way. Now you will realize that we are removing about 1 inch from this side. It's better to be safer than to assume. So that's the point for our breast point. I hope you can see it. Then we'll come to the next point. Now is our underbust measurement. So our underbust divided by 4 is actually 8/1/8. That's 32.5 divided by 4 is 8/1/8. So I'm just going to use 8.25. I will adjust the 1/8 when I'm sewing. So 8.25. Then if you come here and measure, you will see that this is about 2.5 inches. So the 2.5, we are going to cut it out, so you add it to it. I hope that's clear. And then 1 inch to join it, 1 inch to join this side and this side together, and finally the 2 inches sewing allowance. I hope that's clear. We do the same thing, just the same way we did here. We're going to do it for the waist. So the waist is 8/34. The waist is 34. So 34 divided by 4 will give us 8.5. So we come here, we measure 8.5. Then you come to this point here, this part we are removing, which is 2.5. Is that clear? So you are going to add the 2.5 to it because we'll be removing it too. Then you also add your 1 inch to join it back, And finally, your 2 inches, this is 1 2, your 2 inches to as your seam allowance. I hope that is clear. So now we can connect our points together. So we've connected all our points together. Now we can cut it out. All right, so this is what we have. Can you see that? So by the time we join all this together, the essence of adding this other part here is to actually make it key. By the time we join everything together, you see that it's going to form exactly what we need. Can you see? So we are going to place the fabric on the lining to cut the lining now. To cut the lining. So just place it directly and cut your lining. But now I want to cut the back, and I will show us the lining after cutting too. So in laying the back, we are going to consider zip allowance. Okay, so in cutting the back of the clothes, the first thing is I need a straight edge here, so I'm going to rule it out. So after ruling it out, I will lay the clothes. So for me to lay the cloth now, the bust is the largest part. So the bust divided by 4 will give me 38 divided by 4. That will give me 9.5 plus 2 inches seam allowance. That's 1 2. That's 11.5. Then plus my zipper allowance, because this is the back and there will be zipper. So I'm going to use 1.5. You can use 1 inch, 2 inches, depending on what you want. So that gives me 13. And then finally, to connect my princess dart together, I'm going to add 1 inch. So I will lay 14. So that's what I'm going to lay. So I have laid 14. The next thing is to take my vertical measurement, and the shoulder to waist is 16, but I'll be using 17. Unlike for the front where we had to add another extra 2 inches because of the bustier part in the front, the back is not having any bustier part, so we don't need so much allowance. All we need is half to join to the peplum and half to connect at the shoulder, and that's why I'm just adding 1 into 16 to give me 17. And then another point we're going to need is our chest line, which is our nipple, shoulder to nipple line. That's 10 plus half, that's 10.5. So we're going to connect the lines together. So after connecting these lines, the next thing I need to do now is to remove the 1.5 of the the 1.5 needed for my zipper allowance, because we're not going to start taking our measurement from the head here, so you need to remove it, bring it out. So that's that. I rule it out this way because that part is not part of the measurement. That's where we're going to start from. So after ruling the zipper part out this way, the next thing is to take our shoulder measurement. Our shoulder measurement is 15.5 divided by 2 plus ½ inch, and then from there I'll measure my shoulder slope, which I'm using just half. That was the same thing I used in front. And then the neck width we used in front was 4, so that's what you are going to use at the back too, so that it can connect appropriately. So I'm just going to measure 4. For the back, for the back neck, I'm using a V-neck, and I'm coming as low as 6. So depending on how low you want the back to be, you can come as low as 7, 8. But I'll just be using 6, and then I'll connect it together. Since it's a V-neck, can we see how to cut a V-neck? Just connect from the shoulder width to the depth here. So it's as simple as that. Hope you get that. So from this point here, I also want to achieve it here because I need a straight line here at the armhole side. So I'm going to measure my shoulder again at this point here, which will give me 15.5 divided by 2 plus half. So I'll connect it to that point here on a straight line, and the shoulder slope here, you connect it to the half we measured initially. So once I'm through with that, in the front, if you remember very well, you remember that after calculating our armhole, we got 7.5. So I'll just measure 7.5, and then from this point of 7.5, I will measure my bust, 38 divided by 4, that's 9.5, plus the seam allowance of 2 and 1 inch to join at the, I want it to join at the princess dart. So all you need to do is to come down this way to this point here and measure whatever you get, you divide it by 2 and measure it out. That's where your princess dart will start from. Can you see it? So now to the chest line, you measure the 4 inches nipple to nipple on the chest line. You come down to the waist too and do the same thing. But on the waistline here, you come in by half on both sides. This is 4 inch line mark, so you come in by half here and half on this side too. That's the dart. The back dart does not need any serious stuff, just use half. Then connect to the point of 4 inches here, and also connect here. So after doing that, you connect this point here to this point here. Can we see that? So now we can draw our armhole. You can just decide to come out by like ½ inches from this point here, just for accuracy when joining your princess darts together. So that's that. Then the next thing, the final thing we'll be doing in cutting the back is to measure the waist. So the waist is 34. So 34 divided by 4 will give us 8.5. So I'll mark 8.5 plus this 1 inch here that will be removed, and 1 inch to join it back together, half on both sides. And finally the seam allowance of 2 inches, 1, 2. So you connect together. You can see that there's really no wastage of clothes because we measured before laying the clothes. So the next thing is, the final thing now is to cut it out this way. Okay, so this is what we have after cutting the back portion out. This is the dark side. This is what we have. This is what it looks like. Can we see? This is the final outcome. This is what it's going to look like. So you're just going to connect, join these parts together using half. That was what we used. Join it together. You'd have actually cut your lining to shape exactly as it is here too. You do the same for the front too. You do the same joining for the front. This is the front portion here. You actually cut lining that looks exactly like this also for the front. So this is what it looks like. Then you join it together. You join this separately, you join the lining separately, and if you need breast pad or anything for it, you cut it into shape also and attach it to the clothes before joining together. So this brings us to the end of how to cut a princess dart bustier. Please, if you enjoyed the tutorial, subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye.